Hey everybody, it's Chuck Dixon here to talk about what it is I do for a living. And what I do for a living is I write comic books. I'm here to answer your questions, all and sundry, whatever the heck that means. So let's get to it. Question, I think this is from Michael Hutchison. Did you have any problem with getting Mr. Socko to say "rrr" while his mouth was full of gun in a CCA, Comics Code Authority, approved book? Well, initially when I saw this question, I thought, well, I just, I just thought "murph" was the sound anybody would make if their mouth was full or covered with something. Um, but as we'll see, um, I was wrong. I, a rare occasion where I was trying to get away with something. Okay, it all begins with a ventriloquist. This is Scarface. Ventriloquist is dummy. If you're not familiar with the ventriloquist, that's the guy with the glasses. uh, and the Larry Fine haircut in the background. The ventriloquist was a Batman villain introduced by Alan Grant and Norman Brayfogle during their run on Detective Comics. And for my money, one of the greatest recent Batman villains ever created. Ventriloquist was a ventriloquist who lived through his dummy Scarface, who was a homicidal maniac, designed after he's sort of a puppet version of Al Capone. And ventriloquist lives vicariously and violently through this dummy. Ventriloquist has no voice of his own. He can only speak through um, marionettes or puppets. And just absolutely brilliant character. And I told Alan when I met him, I just was effusive over how brilliant I thought this character was. He was an absolutely perfect Batman villain, a theme villain obsessed with the theme, and the theme leads to like really creative situations. I mean, this guy's a true psychotic, but there's that bifurcation where you're focused on the puppet, and I love that kind of stuff. You're focused on the puppet rather than the man controlling it. The man controlling it is a cipher, and I'm there's three things I find hysterical. You can always get a laugh out of me if it's a joke involving a puppet, a parrot, or a monkey. I just love anything involving a puppet, especially when the characters in the story, as I mentioned with the ventriloquist, begin responding to the dummy rather than the person controlling it, and basically, um, gifting this character of wood or plastic with a personality all of its own. Um, and I had a real affinity for the character, as you can see here. I saw this guy at a con and tracked him down. I said, I got to have a photograph with you because I just love this character so much. So anyway, when we went to do Nightfall, part of the setup of Nightfall was is that Bane would release all of the crazies out of Arkham Asylum, ventriloquist being one of them, and this was in order to weaken Batman, to challenge Batman, because Bane is a chess player. He wasn't going to take Batman on head on at the peak of his powers. He was going to wear him down. And over a few months in the books, that's what Bane did. He wore Batman down. And one of the things was the Arkham Escape. Now we had all of these great characters all of a sudden released in the 3 monthly titles, and we could do whatever we wanted with them. And I vividly recall at the Bat Summit asking Alan, I said, can I have the ventriloquist? Can I basically tell the ventriloquist story, the story of his escape and what happened afterwards? And I said, could I tell it with your blessing? And Alan is like, he knew how much I loved the character. He knew I had respect for it. I wasn't going to do anything to thwart or permanently change anything that he had already done. And so he said, yeah. He said, yeah, have a field day with it. And I did. So the ventriloquist escapes. But like everyone else in Arkham, he's not allowed near his costumes or his props. They're not with them at Arkham, and so he needs a puppet. And he doesn't have Scarface, but he needs a puppet to help him find Scarface. And so he takes off one of his own socks and creates Socko. And with Socko, he begins going on a hunt for Scarface. Where is Scarface? And he finally takes hostage the prosecuting attorney to try to determine where Scarface is, what evidence locker is Scarface now residing in. And to do this, he takes on two allies, Socko and a duck puppet. And so ventriloquist is acting through a pair of characters now, acting in concert. But Socko is clearly the one in charge. He's the dominant alpha personality. I even had an opportunity because they put the attorney on trial, a mock trial with the ventriloquist hiding behind a dresser drawer, putting on a mock trial puppet show. And this allowed me to introduce Officer O'Hara, which was a sly reference to the 1966 Batman show. And I always enjoyed it whenever I could get through a reference to the 66 Batman show past Denny O'Neil, because he hated the show so much. But I got O'Hara in, and he's doing his typical Irish brogue. So that was fun. And eventually, they do find Scarface. And in this scene, we find out that Socko isn't so impressed. Socko still thinks he's in charge, and he's not terribly impressed with Scarface, which is, pretty bold statement for a piece of footwear. So eventually, it has to happen. Scarface and Socko have to fight for dominance, and they end up holding guns on one another. And the inevitable happens, and the ventriloquist ends up shooting himself in both his hands. Which I thought, now this happened over a course of like 4 issues of Detective that I got to tell the saga of the ventriloquist's escape and eventual recapture. But boy, it was a lot of fun to write. And yes, as you can see in this scene, Socko is clearly saying something dirty. It's not just, I thought it was just with his mouth full of gun. No, he's definitely making a statement here, which you can determine for yourself. So I don't usually do that. I'm surprised. I actually am literally surprised, because I wasn't one of these guys trying to slip stuff through, but apparently I got one past the Comics Code Authority. I got an Air Force joke going right over their head. So Scott Peterson, one of the associate editors at the time, full editor later, he caught it. But of course he would. He's got a filthy mind, that man. All right. Next question. Hey, Chuck, 2 quick questions. Do you still have any current mainstream do you read any current mainstream comics? I answered that in an earlier video. I'm going to take on his second question, which is, why do you think the character Asriel has failed to have mainstream staying power when, in my opinion, he was a lot more compelling than a lot of other more popular characters? Well, Asriel was created as part of Nightfall as well. He's created by Denny O'Neil, a costume created by Joe Quesada. And, he was meant to eventually become Batman, or as we always affectionately referred to him as Asbats. And of course, the crux of the Nightfall story is that, Bruce Wayne, Batman, is put out of action and has to be off the scene for a while, and chooses Jean-Paul Vallée, the former Asriel, as his replacement. And the choice is, of course, disastrous choice, because Jean-Paul Vallée he's got a lot of personality problems, borderline psychotic, and basically goes nuts as Batman. Uses the authority of Batman to go on a eventually homicidal rampage of his own, causing Bruce Wayne to have to recuperate even faster to come back to defeat him and take back the mantle of the Bat. Why isn't he a more popular character? I think the reason is he wore out his welcome. It's as simple as that. We knew going in that this character had to ultimately be unpopular in order for Nightfall to work. Because one of the themes behind the Nightfall event, and it's rare that I was ever involved in anything this grand, but it was to solve the age-old question of, should Batman kill? Would Batman be better as a character if he was closer to the Punisher than he was to, Superman? Should Batman be moved over to the psychotic vigilante side? Would that make him more appealing? And our entire aim with Nightfall was to prove that no, that was not a good idea. So we were going to give the readers the kind of homicidal jackass that they thought some of them thought they wanted Batman to be, and show them why this was a terrible idea to have this ignoble terrorist take the place of Batman. And by doing that, we would, by contrast, show what made Batman so special, because he wouldn't kill, because he had this code of conduct, code of honor, that he was going to play by the rules. He was going to play by the rule of law, more specifically, and we succeeded too well in making Asbats unlikable because sales began to plummet. The readers didn't like him. They didn't want to read about him. And so we moved up our plans to bring Bruce Wayne back. I remember a couple of emergency summits where we basically moved our schedule up by almost a year, if I'm not mistaken, because Asbats was going to be around for quite a bit longer than he was intended to originally. So we had to kind of change our plans. And then Asriel continued on in 100 issues of his own comic. Now you say, well, he continued on in 100 issues. Why? That must have meant he was popular. No, it didn't. Because DC is the home of the sweetheart deal. And the sweetheart deal that Denny O'Neil had, bless his soul, was that Asriel go to 100 issues no matter what the sales were. And that's what they did. And he went to 100 issues and was canceled. It was Denny's retirement plan from DC. And, it worked out for Denny. DC didn't lose money on it, but they didn't make money either. And readers, the sales eroded over time, let's say, because, and it's a pity because going into the series, the readers didn't like the character. And there's nothing you can do about that. It's very hard to turn that around once readers have made up their mind. So I hope that answers your question. It's certainly, I'm sure for most of you, it reveals something you never knew. And I think in this very video, we'll have some more on DC Sweetheart Deals. I'm not sure. Can't remember. Next question. I read Batman Legacy a short time back, and apparently in the interaction with fans, some of them believe that Bane raped Talia al Ghul. Is that really true? Was that the intent, and how did that relationship originate? And why did Talia ultimately reject Bane? Bane of the Demon doesn't make it clear because she liked him 1 second, and then his attack on Cobra made her dislike him. Were there plans to follow up on that relationship development that you couldn't for whatever reason? Would appreciate a clarification. Thanks. Well, he's referring to the basically relationship between Talia al Ghul, Ra's al Ghul's daughter, and Bane. And it was an arranged marriage. Now, I don't know where anybody would get the impression that Bane raped her. First of all, I don't write rape, especially in comic books, especially in mainstream comic books. I don't think it's a subject matter that is has a place there. So yeah, that did not happen. And if it did, Ra's would have killed him. That would have been the end of Bane. Now, he didn't mind setting his daughter up with Bane because, remember, Ra's is about continuing the bloodline and everything else. We all remember that he basically picked out Batman as the perfect mate for his daughter, the perfect son-in-law. And of course, Batman rejected that because Ra's al Ghul was evil. But to Ra's eyes, Bane was just as good, if not better, because Bane is totally amoral. He's just like Ra's. He's an amoral, ambitious world conqueror. And Ra's thought, well, this guy would not only make a great son-in-law, he'd make a great replacement for Ubu, my thug. I could, have my cake and eat it too. Turn the whole thing into a family affair. And so he sort of arranged that Talia and Bane get together. And Talia was turned off to Bane when she realized what a brute this guy is. When you get right down to it, the guy's an animal. There's no real refinement like there was with Bruce Wayne. Bruce Wayne is is a sophisticated guy and somewhat of a romantic, and Bane is none of that. And but still, Ra's threw the two of them together because he had a tremendous amount of respect for Bane. After all, Bane beat him at chess. Now, how hard is it to beat a guy who's been around forever at the game of chess? But Bane did it. And I liked this story. Well, I wrote it. But I liked the story because it brought out more of Bane's intellect to show, this guy, had the smarts as well as the brawn. And, Ra's had all kinds of grandiose plans that led from Bane of the Demon miniseries into the Legacy crossover. And, but, Batman, Batman put the skids to all that. And it led ultimately, the point of Legacy was to lead ultimately to a Batman Bane rematch, which we accomplished. So there you go. No, there was no rape involved. It was consensual. Talia does as Daddy tells her to do. And Bane, almost became a member of the Al Ghul clan, but it was not to be. Next question, Jared Mitchell. I enjoy these so very much, as well as the unauthorized TV videos. Thanks for the plug, Jared. Authorized TV, where there's lots more of these videos, go into even more detail. I would love to hear something about your non-comic writing jobs for video games or G.I. Joe profile cards, etc. I don't remember writing any G.I. Joe cards. Maybe I did, and I forgot about it. But I do remember writing some video games, most of which never saw the light of day. Apparently, there's a whole lot of pre-production done in video for games that never appear to the public. That's how much money they have. I remember being hired to write dialogue for a Batman video game coming off of the Dark Knight movie. And it was a Joker-centric game. I don't remember a whole lot about it, and I never saw anything from it. I was just told to write dialogue, which meant that I was to write dialogue for like ancillary characters like thugs and cops. And so I was just given these sheets of dialogue, and it indicated where I had to fill in, and it would say Thug 1, Thug 2, that kind of thing. All the other dialogue was there. Batman and Joker and whoever else was in the game, their dialogue was there, but they wanted me to do this, and they were paying well. Video games pay well. So, okay. But boy, it wasn't fun at all. It wasn't fun at all because you have to write hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of lines of dialogue, because in a video game, the options are practically endless. It's a dense amount of material, and you never know, what the player is going to demand of the characters. Will this character speak, that character not speak, whatever. So what I found was I had to write endless variations of, let's get out of here and look over there. And it's like, how many different ways can you say this? So I did it. It wasn't a lot of fun. I think I wrote like 600 or 700 lines of dialogue, and then they told me that the whole project had been canceled. So, I mean, not because of me, obviously. I don't know what reason. And they moved on to other things. Now, I did the same thing on a Expendables game. Sly Stallone recommended me to write the dialogue because I understood the characters. This one was a lot more fun because I got to write all the characters, and I got to write them in their voices. And that was a lot of fun. And it wasn't all let's get out of here and hey, look over there. There were exchanges. So I got to write some humor, and I was a big fan of Sly's screenplay for Expendables 1, which in a lot of ways, especially dialogue wise, does not resemble the finished film. And there was a definite patois, a shared language between the characters, and that was a lot of fun to write in the game. Sly told me that at the recording session, the guys were cracking up a lot at a lot of the stuff I wrote. So that was cool. That was very much a fun project to do. Just like the Batman project, but I had more free reign to write what I wanted to write. So I worked on a mobile game. I can't even remember the name of it. It was for a Japanese company, but I was working with guys out of California. And it was the most miserable writing experience of my life, but consequently the best paying. they paid an outrageous amount of money per hour for us to not only write this game but play it. We had to play this game, and it may sound like, wow, you got paid to play a mobile game, but they had to keep reminding me to play it because it was a stupid game. It was really idiotic, and I think you might just share my opinion. Now, apparently, this company, they hired a market research firm to find out what kind of game kids would want to play. And what this marketing research company did, and they were probably paid millions to find this out, they found out that kids liked mutants and they liked zombies. So yeah, I know you could have probably told them that for $10. So they made a game where mutants fight zombies, and it was repetitive and boring and stupid, and but we had the right background Bibles for the characters. We had the right continuity pages that were very strictly controlled by faceless, nameless drones somewhere higher up in the company. I was constantly having to do rewrites and minute corrections to dialogue that didn't make any sense to me at all. The formatting was weird, and the game was repetitive. I mean, tic-tac-toe is less repetitive than this game. Um, and, like I said, they paid us to play it. And it was just boring as hell because it was so easy to play. It was just, shoot, 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 go on to the next screen. And every screen was pretty much the same. It would just have a different background behind it. It was definitely, I, I, I'd like to say I've never hacked for a living, but I guess this is the closest I got. I really did try to put my, typical humor and character stuff in, but I was resisted at every turn. They wanted it to be dull and repetitive and boring. So it's kind of like working for Hanna-Barbera in the 60s. Don't make it good, just make it fast. So there you go. If you could get rid of one, oh yeah, this is James Mealy. If you could get rid of one overused trope in comic storytelling, what would it be and why? Um, a lot of the angst. These characters suffer angst. I understand that your planet blew up, your parents were killed, Uncle Ben died in your arms. But to year after year after year, just return to that as some sort of motivating or enervating, or immobilizing trauma is a little much because it's not like real life. It works in a movie, the running time, but these characters are around for decade after decade after decade. Eventually, you just want to say, look, get over it. All right. When I was a kid, it drove me nuts how tormented Cap was over the death of Bucky. My dad lost friends in World War II too, but he didn't sit around, moping. So, I don't know how much of that appears now, but I know there's a lot of, one event drives a character and they just beat that dead horse. They beat that plot line into the ground. And it's just a little much, a little sitting around. It's one of the reasons I did not like, and do not like the X-Men is there's a lot of whining and a lot of like, oh, I wasn't treated right, that kind of crap. And these are supposed to be heroes, supposed to get over it. The other trope I do like that they keep trying to get rid of is the secret identity. They keep trying to eliminate it. I remember when I was at DC, they did everything they could. If a character had an active alter ego and active complications in their life because of the alter ego, they're always trying to get rid of it as if it stood in the way of good stories. And I'm like, no, this is what makes good stories. Peter Parker having to hide who he is, Barry Allen having to hide who he is. It's what makes these stories interesting, is make these characters also relatable. They have a secret. They can't tell anybody. And especially in the case of Spider-Man, it was the cause of so much of the drama, the interior drama of the story, that he knew he was this fabulous character. He knew he had these powers. He knew he was this amazing person, but he couldn't tell anyone. And so he had to, continue pretending to be a nebbish. Clark Kent used to have this problem as well. But I think the TV show cured him of that because George Reeves was almost cooler as Clark Kent than he was as Superman. So that characterization sort of melted away. But I loved writing Tim Drake. It was challenging. It was hard sometimes, but I loved writing Tim Drake's explanations to his father of where he's been, where these bruises came from, why he was so late, and Tim's internal pain over the fact that I'm lying to my father. I have to deceive my father, but it's for the greater good. And it was always this dichotomy in the character that was, it was this great story, Grist, and I don't know why anybody would want to eliminate it. But I see now, a lot of characters are eschewing the secret identity. I just think it's an enormous mistake. I think there's a reason to have a secret identity, not only just for dramatic purposes, for the actual logistics. I mean, yeah, if you were we have, SEAL team members who do not reveal their identities. These guys are as close to superheroes as you can get in this world, and for that reason cannot reveal because of the, dastardliness of the people that they fight, cannot reveal who they are, or they would put their families at risk, just like the superheroes used to use that same excuse for, why they needed two identities. So there you go. One trope I hate, one trope I hope they keep around. What do you listen to? Favorite bands, favorite songs? Oh my goodness. This is where everybody says, oh no, he's not going to tell us that now, is he? He's not going to tell us that dream he had last night. He's not going to read us his blog. Yeah, I like all kinds of music. Everybody thinks they've got an eclectic music taste, unless you're a metalhead, I guess. But I I think I've got on my mother box that I take with me on long car rides. I've got 20,000 songs and all kinds of genres. Pop, rock, country, bluegrass. I'm not a big folk fan, although I love traditional music if it's played well by Dave Allen or Ry Cooder. I grew up in the 60s rock and roll, never liked progressive rock. In the 70s, I listened to a lot of 50s music, but a lot of people did. I wasn't alone in that. Embraced the new wave and punk in a big way because it reminded me of 50s and 60s music. My love of country western comes from my dad, who was a big fan, and I don't listen to a lot of rap. I don't listen to a lot of 70s soul music. I don't listen to disco unless it's Donna Summer. But I'll listen to jazz all the way back to the 20s and 30s. I like Frank Sinatra and Bing Crosby, British Invasion stuff. So yeah, a little bit of everything. A little bit of reggae, a little bit of ska. I have a theory that 5 minutes of reggae a year is all anybody needs to listen to. So there you go. There's an answer that really doesn't answer. I just like a lot of different kinds of music. So there you have it. Harding McFadden says, so aside from Batman, who's your favorite Golden Age character to work with and why? Wildcat. Earlier video, I talked about Batman and Wildcat, the crossovers that Bo Smith and I did. And I just really liked this character. I liked him. My first exposure to him was he would show up in Brave and Bold. He would never had his own series at DC when I was a kid, but they would, pull him off the dust heap of the Golden Age and team him with Batman. And what I liked about him was he was older. He was older than Batman. He was clearly, a really fit guy in his early 50s, maybe, because he was getting gray around the temples and he'd been around the block, and it was implied that he trained Bruce Wayne to box. And I thought, well, there's just a whole bunch of reasons to think this guy's cool. And I enjoy writing him because he's a genuine tough guy, and you get the boxing element to it because he was a professional boxer, and that's kind of cool because he approaches things, fights with the bad guys and everything else as if he was in the ring. Plus, he rode around on a motorcycle, which was awesome too. I never wanted to have a motorcycle. I never wanted to ride a motorcycle, but vicariously, yeah, motorcycles are cool. People look cool on them. And Wildcat was, I don't know, he was a fun character. Now, Golden Age character I'd love to write, but have never really had the opportunity except for a few pages, is Submariner. I just, this guy is just, I love writing characters who are unapologetic pricks. And that's, and that's Namor all over the block all day long. Yeah, I'd love to write some Submariner because he is just like Comicdom's biggest jerk. And it's a lot of fun to put a guy like that through his paces. So that's it for this outing. Someone mentioned in one of the pages, one of the comment pages, that they would love to support these videos. Well, I don't ask for money for the YouTube videos, but they aren't monetized. I'm doing these, for fun, and because people seem interested. But if you did want to go to my Patreon, I have a Patreon. It's at Archaven Comics, and Archaven Comics Patreon is all me. It's the Chuck Dixon Slush Fund, and if you want to contribute $1, $3, $5, whatever, if you like these videos and want to help out over there, and at the higher levels, $3 and $5, you actually get stuff, digital comics, physical comics, things like that. And the money doesn't go to these videos, but it does go to help me create new Archaven Comics projects, new Archaven Comics properties, which I own. This is like a creator-owned program for me. And, we're working on a whole bunch of stuff. Me and Frank Fosco and Tim Lottie and Will Callaghan are working on a whole bunch of new comics books material for webtoons, for print, for digital over there. So if you like these videos and you feel like you want to kick in a little something, hey, go over to Patreon and maybe you'll get some cool comics too. So that's it for me. See you next time. See you down the road, and take care of yourself.